Through the wild upland scenery of the North Yorkshire Moors National Park run the steam trains of Britain's busiest preserved line. The North Yorkshire Moors Railway stretches 18 miles from Grosmont to Pickering. It was opened in 1836 to take agricultural produce to the fishing port of Whitby. George Stephenson planned the track for horsepower. Steam power only came after heavier rails were laid 10 years later. Trains still follow Stephenson's route, where the Newtondale Gorge cuts through the high moorland. At first, coaches were lowered down the steep northern slope into the Esk Valley by a rope. Not until 1865 could steam locos work throughout. The dangerous 1 in 10 rope incline was finally avoided by a 3-mile deviation from the summit of the line down to Grosmont. The route became part of the North Eastern Railway and was grouped with the London and North Eastern. Though closed by British Rail in 1965 after the beaching plan, it was not the end of this line. Helped by the County Council and the National Park, the North Yorkshire Moors Historical Railway Trust took over. Since the Duchess of Kent reopened the line on the 1st of May 1973, it has been transformed. Funded by the 1990 share issue, Grosmont Loco Depot is being developed into the John Bellwood Centre to commemorate the chief engineer of the National Railway Museum. The existing shed took its name from the 1865 deviation off the original route to the rope-worked incline. Each morning the yard bustles with action. The fires were lit before dawn, as early as 5 a.m. in the first steam locos to go off shed. At the press of a button, diesels like ex-British Rail Class 25s, Sibylla and Diana, can work engineer and occasional passenger trains. Although steam is a great attraction to the public, they rarely see the work behind the scenes. Dame Vera Lynn is a powerful War Department 210 heavy freight loco. The smokebox door is open for char to be dug out and the fire tubes cleaned of soot. The boiler water has just been washed out after 21 days in steam. As the loco was built in 1944, the workshop staff had to rebuild the firebox before the loco entered service in 1989. The duty fitter is checking that the washout plugs are tight before steam is raised again, a job that will take many hours with a cold boiler. "841 is a former Southern Railway S15 class mixed traffic loco. It was built in 1936 to an earlier design by Uri for the London and South Western Railway. The classic 460 layout, with its outside cylinders and Walschaerts valve gear, was copied by other British designers. 841 spent its life on lines between Exmouth Junction and Waterloo. Having just received a new boiler, it was shunted into Barry's scrapyard before the end of steam on British Rail. The hulk was rescued from the cutting torch by the Essex Locomotive Society and gradually restored to mainline condition. Named Green King, it left the Nene Valley Railway to come to Yorkshire in 1978. Now it runs without a name in the authentic unlined black that matches its original number. Before each 36-mile round trip, the locomotive running gear must be checked and oiled by the driver. The oil boxes on the crossheads, valve gear and slide bars receive special attention as they transmit all the power from the cylinders to the wheels. Meanwhile, the loco is cleaned from the tender axle boxes to the top of the boiler. Steam locos work in a filthy environment. Coal, ash, rust and oil quickly build up over the working parts unless kept rigorously clean. Now the plain black paint glistens in the steamy light. "80135 is a 264 tank loco, designed like the War Department 210 by Riddles. This British Railway standard class was built at Brighton in 1956 for suburban and branch line work. It only carries half as much water in the side tanks and coal in the bunker as 841. However, the crew have good protection and visibility for both directions of travel. Before the first passenger service, 80135 must run light engine to pick up its train, which was stabled overnight at Pickering. The tank locos must take water at both ends of the line. 841 carries 5,000 gallons of water in its tender and uses about 2,000 on a return run, depending on the load and conditions. Each loco will use 1 ton to 1.5 tons of coal each day. The drivers and firemen are usually volunteers. Some have a railway background, but the others come from all walks of life. They come here because this is the nearest thing to working with steam on the main line, both in the difficulties of the route and the professional approach needed. Footplatemen book on in the shed, read the notices and take their duties from the roster board. Some turns last over 100 miles in a day, and regular volunteers can work over 3,000 miles a year on steam traction. "841 then drops back along the head shunt into Grosmont station. This double-track tunnel replaced the original single-track bored by Stevenson, which now has the distinction of being the only Grade 2 listed tunnel in the country. Grosmont was once an industrial town with blast furnaces choking the sky above the station. It is now a rural junction on the British Rail branch from Middlesbrough to Whitby, although most visitors come by steam train from Pickering. This platform has been extended to cope with the crowds, while resiting the old signal box from Whitby will ease operations here. Before trains shunt or depart, the signalman must close the crossing gates. Meanwhile, the fireman builds the fire deep at the back corners for the climb ahead. The sloping firebed makes no smoke while the loco is standing, but it will soon burn through when the driver opens the regulator. sand is dropped on the rails to stop the wheels slipping as 841 leaves Grosmont. In the cab hangs the hoop carrying a token. This gives the driver the authority to be in the first section of single line to Goathland. The fireman has to start firing straight away, as 841 is at the bottom of a daunting 1 in 49 bank. The loco must climb over 300 feet in the next 3 miles. After passing the ex-Lambton Colliery Loco number 5 in the shed yard, 841 is soon climbing high above the cottages of Esk Valley, where a mineral line passed underneath. Then it crosses the Moork Esk River and is tributary the Ellerbeck on lofty viaducts. The whole route is marked with the distinctive mileposts of the old North Eastern Railway. The quarter miles are marked by pointed tops, while distances are measured from Rillington Junction near Moulton on the York to Scarborough line. The fireman must maintain the water level in the boiler and checks that the injectors are not overflowing. This gradient cannot be rushed, and 841 is allowed to find its own pace. The driver must beware of wheel slip while the loco is working so hard with the regulator wide open. The reverser wheel is set to give late steam cut-off in the cylinders for maximum power. Meanwhile, the fireman keeps shoveling to avoid a hole in the firebed which would make the steam pressure falter. On this trip, the fire is dancing incandescent like a volcano. A grey haze colours the exhaust at the chimney top, and a feather of white at the safety valves tells that 841 is steaming well, past Darnholm. At the top of the steepest part of the bank is Goathland. Between the trains, passengers can linger in the village or walk the historic railway trail down the old rope incline. Goathland station feels little change from its Victorian heyday. However, this northeastern railway atmosphere has been carefully restored since preservation. Displayed in one of the platform shelters are some old stone sleeper blocks and fish-bellied rail from the original track of 1836. As 80135 approaches from the south, the fireman holds out the staff, giving authority for the single line from Levisham. While the train rolls past, the signalman exchanges it for a token for the section down the bank to Grosmont. Then the crew of 841 take the blue staff as their authority to proceed on to Levisham. The signalman changes and locks the points at both ends of the passing loop, then pulls off the starter and advanced starter signals. There were over 100 signals along the line, but most had been removed by British Rail. Now the appearance of Goathland has been restored with distinctive northeastern railway slotted post signals rescued from other local branch lines. Char raining from the chimney, 841 has still to climb for another 2 miles on a gradient of 1 in 90. The driver crosses the cab to set the hydrostatic lubricator, feeding oil to the cylinders. Superheated steam needs good lubrication, but it does reduce coal consumption and the back-breaking work of the fireman. The climb continues out of the valley. At Moorgates, the original formation of Stevenson's line can be seen crossing the Cattle Arch Bridge. This bridge was built to maintain the ancient rights for animals to graze freely over the moors. The line clings to the edge of the hillside as it winds its way steadily higher and higher into the empty moors towards Ellerbeck. On the skyline are the golf ball radar domes of the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System on Fylingdales Moor. For the fireman who has not rested since leaving Grosmont, they mean 841 is near the summit of the line, 550 feet above sea level. Next, the train runs across the expanse of Fen Bog. In 1836, this was the most difficult ground over which a railway has yet been attempted. Underneath the track, the peat is over 40 foot deep, so Stevenson had to literally float his railway across the bog on a raft of brushwood and sheep fleeces filled with heather. Then the line winds along the Newtondale Gorge, which was cut through the sandstone by torrents of meltwater 10,000 years ago in the Ice Ages. The gorge gives a natural passage for the railway through the heart of the moors to Pickering. Now the hard work is over on this leg of the journey for both loco and fireman. This area is so remote from public roads that a new halt was opened in 1981 to give ramblers access to the forest trails. As trains only stop on request, the fireman keeps a good lookout for passengers on the open platform. It took its name from the old signal box at Newtondale, which once controlled a mineral siding. The driver makes gentle applications of the vacuum brakes to hold the speed as the train now rolls down gradients of 1 in 60 towards Levisham. The fireman takes the staff to give to the signalman at Levisham, who lowers the barriers at the level crossing. The driver whistles acknowledgement when he sees the white flashing light indicating the barriers are down. The road disappears deep into the forest. Levisham village is almost a mile and a half from the station to which it gave its name. For the next single-line section, to New Bridge Box on the outskirts of Pickering, the loco crew take the red staff. The signalman sets and locks the points, but it's much harder to pull the signal levers, which are linked to the northeastern slotted post semaphores by over 200 yards of cable. Meanwhile, 80135 has shunted back into the platform at Goathland. Tank locos used to pull the Whitby to York trains before diesel multiple units were introduced on the line in 1958. Since the restoration, sponsored by its owner, Josh de Crow, 80135 has set a record for preserved locos. In one season, it ran an impressive 17,000 miles. Its crew can take a short break from the heat of the footplate before the departure of the next train. Travelling with the driver and fireman is a cleaner who has come to learn the road and the old traditions of steam. "80135 carries a 33A shed plate to recall its first duties running between London, Tilbury and Southend. When the wheels start to roll, this red bed of fire will soon be white hot. Instead of boiling tea in a billy can, it must create the steam both to move the train and work the brakes. Before departure time, the fireman sets an injector to feed water into the boiler. This will hold the steam pressure just below 225 pounds per square inch. Otherwise, the safety valves will lift and blow it to waste. Into the yard at the end of Grosmont Tunnel, 30926 moves under its own steam after restoration. This school's class loco was designed by Maunsell in 1937 for the Southern Railway. Saved by Steamtown, it spent 24 years across the Atlantic before the new owner, Clifford Brown, funded Repton's return. "18 miles away, the track crosses the southern boundary of the national park and passes a trout farm. It now ends by the site of the original terminus of the Whitby and Pickering Railway. When the line was rebuilt for steam locos in 1845, the present station buildings at Pickering were erected. The railway had just been extended south beyond the station to Rillington Junction. Pickering gained greater importance when routes led to the seaside at Scarborough and to Pillmore on the East Coast Main Line. But by 1966, all had gone. The local council wanted the site for a car park, and only after a public inquiry was the railway able to use this listed building as a station again. Having uncoupled the loco, the fireman removes the oil lamp from the top bracket. This branch line train has reached journey's end. Meanwhile, 80135 is climbing near the summit of the line. Here, the tight curves are fitted with check rails and greasers to reduce the flange wear on the wheels. One project is the restoration of the turntable at Pickering, not to turn locos at the end of each journey, but to enable all the rolling stock to be turned occasionally and even out flange wear. 841 now must return tender first to Grosmont.
Right to back.
When the railway baron George Hudson incorporated this line in the York and North Midland Railway, it had to be completely rebuilt for steam traction from the track upwards. A famous York architect, George Andrews, designed new stations. Both Whitby and Pickering once supported impressive overall routes. The screw coupling is tightened to remove any slackness that will snatch on the train. When the vacuum brake hoses are connected, the continuous train brakes can be released before the driver opens the regulator to start.
I don't know, we've got a shoot to do when we get back, haven't we? Time it right, we have just been exposed when we come.
Leaving Pickering, the driver whistles on the approaches to New Bridge Crossing. The signal box controls all the station tracks at Pickering. Once there were sidings for a 2-foot gauge quarried tramway. The signalman can give a staff for the single-line sections to Levisham or Goathland, depending on the service. In the summer, trains pass each other at both the intermediate stations. In spring and autumn, they cross alternately at each passing loop. As the two trains approach Levisham, the signalman can see 841 far down the 2-mile straight on the Pickering side. 80135, however, is completely hidden by the trees until it whistles for the crossing. The level run from Pickering gives the fireman of 841 time to prepare for a stiff climb. Ahead are gradients as steep as 1 in 49 to the summit of the line at Ellerbeck. As the climb will last for 6 miles, the fireman takes the opportunity to throw some coal forward in the tender. After the staffs have been exchanged, 80135 leaves for New Bridge and 841 for Goathland. However, the northern section of the line between Grosmont and Goathland is rarely quiet. In between scheduled passenger trains, locos are tested before they go into regular service. Repton has pulled the stock of the North Yorkshiremen up the 3 miles of 1 in 49. The school's class were designed with 3 cylinders to operate expresses on the sharp curves and steep gradients to Hastings. However, when this named train makes its popular twice-weekly runs, its passengers come to enjoy a leisurely meal in beautiful surroundings. Its restaurant cars are painted umber and cream, to match the Pullman car livery. Because of the high axle loading on this 109-ton machine, the track and underbridges had to be carefully inspected before it first ran. However, 4 coupled locos were used on this line from its early days. Edward Fletcher designed engines for the North Eastern Railway specially for this area, which were nicknamed the Whitby Bogies, while the LNER Shire class, designed by Sir Nigel Gresley, were similar in most dimensions to Repton. Those based at Whitby worked local passenger trains and scenic excursions from the West Riding. The line has been renowned for its scenic beauty since the first railway excursion in the world was run in 1839. Meanwhile, 841 is climbing through the Newtondale Gorge to the summit of the line. As it leaves the forest and the regulator is eased, the loco blows off steam from the safety valves. Bare ash ballast alongside the sleepers reveals where a second track was lifted by British Rail. Now it provides useful access for the Land Rover patrols in times of high fire risk. These old sections of bullhead rail and timber sleepers in ash ballast are being relaid with flat-bottomed rail and concrete sleepers in stone ballast. However, the current cost of renewal is around £65,000 a mile. Maintenance of track, bridges and fences in these bleak conditions is a mammoth task. Once over the summit, the driver of 841 can shut off steam and coast past Fylingdale's radar station towards Goathland. As 841 rolls past Goathland Box to stop by the speed restriction board, another three-cylinder loco climbs the bank from Grosmont on steam trials. The North Eastern Railway Q7 is an 080 heavy freight loco built nearby at Darlington in 1919. It spent all its life in the North East before joining the National Collection. Number 901 was last steamed in 1964 and has just been restored by the North Eastern Loco Preservation Group. The fireman of 841 takes advantage of the brief halt to level the fire. The long dart is used to break up the clinkers of ash melted onto the fire bars by the heat of the fire. The last train from Grosmont leaves behind Dame Vera Lynn. This was built by the North British Works and went to Egypt. After 40 years in Greece, latterly as a snowplough, it ran briefly on the Lavender Line in Sussex. However, there was no opportunity to use the power of this loco with its steam sanders on a mile of track. After its purchase by Clifford Brown and rebuild at Grosmont, the 210O emerged in 1989, equal to any train on the 1 in 49. The valley echoes with the sound of the exhaust. The gradient does not ease at all until the points for the passing loop at Goathland. The noise of the exhaust changes as the driver first shuts the regulator and reopens it in small valve to pull the train into the platform. Soon 80135 appears from Levisham and the fireman leans out to exchange tokens. When the signalman has transferred the Levisham token to the crew of the Austerity, they can proceed. This is a remarkable line, operating over some of the most severe terrain on any preserved railway in the world. Daily, from Easter to November, its trains run the highest mileage and greatest number of steam journeys in the UK. Yet, carrying over 250,000 passengers each year makes little impact on the landscape. When the train has passed, the open moor and the forest are left to the wildlife. For over 150 years, this remote part of the North Yorkshire moors has remained completely unspoilt because of its railway.